In the past 6 months, 49 victims of rape were under the age of 18 years old, with cases in schools involving either a teacher or students. With me today to talk more about changing mindsets and creating conversations around this is Fiji Women's Crisis Center Coordinator, Shamima Ali. Good evening, Shamima, and thank you for joining me. I try to get the other relevant stakeholders in, because I know that there needs to be a talk about this, getting the right people in to go into schools, and especially around the issues of rape. Now, earlier this week, you had stated that there is a need for conversation, focus groups within schools, and schools need to be more open about getting the right people in. Could you elaborate more on that?
Definitely. This is of growing concern to us because of what we're hearing when we go out in the community, what we're looking at while we're looking at statistics from the DPP's office and otherwise from various other service providers. So we have been thinking about for a very long time, and we used to do all these things in the past. Things are changing for young people. There's exposure to so many things that wasn't there about 10 years ago, let's say. So, but I believe that the conversations around rape, children's rights, gender, human rights, these things have gone missing over the last few years. That it's happening, but it's happening on an ad hoc basis, and it seems like certain people are allowed into schools and certain people are not. We believe that there needs to be these conversations. We have to be at the same table. We have to be on the same page, and start talking about these things and looking at the best way forward, and including young people in the conversation. It's not just about the service providers, certain arms of government, certain faith-based organizations. It's about including those whom we are talking about.
So how would you go about it if you were to create something in schools and working with the relevant stakeholders?
Well, I think first of all, we'll have to look at what the problem is. I believe that there is a lot of generalization about drugs, about children behaving badly and all those things. So generalizations, there are a lot, and they're hardly based on any sound data. We need to get that together in the first place. And there is an EVO task force in Fiji that people don't know much about, which is the Elimination of Violence Against Women Task Force. And it's quite a dynamic entity where both government and non-governmental organizations have come together. So I believe at the moment we're talking about women, domestic violence and so on, that this conversation can take place there. And we need to look at how to collect the best data. And it is around. We just have to put it all together. So that would be the first step, to know exactly what the problem is, what the prevalence is. We need to talk to young people about where do they think these ideas are coming into, why are they doing this kind of thing, so that kind of thing. So we need to bring in researchers and so on. So that's the first step. And then we have to start working with the education department. We have to start talking about the educators. We've got we've got universities in this country, we've got researchers. We have to start talking about them, the experts, bringing them in. We've got a UN entity, UNICEF, we've got UN Women. So these are the people with the technical assistance. And that conversation has to take place, and then we have to strategize. We have to have a national strategy as to how we go forward. So, but all these people have to be in there with the faith-based organizations, the police, and so on. So that being the first step, what we can do right now while we're waiting for the data to come in to work with what we have. I believe that schools should be a lot more open to people. They should call in people who have the expertise, and not just people who perhaps are pillars of society or are social workers and so on, but who do have the knowledge about looking at rape and sexual assault with a gendered perspective, because it is a gendered crime.
Why do you think that is? The schools aren't, like you said, aren't getting the people in. Why do you think that they haven't called people who are specialized in rape cases and can talk on the issue of rape, but they're more focused on the others, like you said, probably sexual reproductive health, because they're tied to the Ministry of Health.
Yes. But you can bring in sexual assault in there, you see. So if you have the experts, how you do include that with what we already have, what we already are having. I think it's because, we have to talk about rights. And the education system somehow has become sort of very Puritan in how we talk about rights, how we talk about sex, and things like that. So you bring in the safe people who don't question the system, because we have to question the system, you know. We have to question our laws, we have to question access to justice issues, responses from police, from service providers, and so on, you know. So we have to do a bit of advocacy also. People seem to shy away from advocacy and they don't want to hear the truth. I know that some schools, when we have requested, we used to send out requests in December, at the close of the year, to say, look, we are around and these are the places we will be around. So if you go and do a community education in Ra, what are the schools there? We'd write, we are available, we can come and do sessions and so on. So we used to be allowed in there. But then we have been told that they don't want the kids to know too much about rights, because then they will start misbehaving. You know, so there's misconception about children's rights and so on. So I think that seems to be the major problem. Another one is one has to be registered with the education department to be able to go into schools. So, you know, so some NGOs are often not the ones that would be allowed in there.
I know they can get temporary kind of registration from a certain time.
Yes.
But why do you think the ministry isn't open to that? Is it because, I mean, like you said, one issue being not educating the kids on knowing what their rights are and them acting up. But what could also be another issue?
Talking about sex, basically.
Yeah.
This whole society doesn't want to talk about it. Yet, you know, we are rampant as far as sexual activities go. You know, we hear it every day and so on. But we don't want to talk about it. We become very Puritan around that. You know, we can't talk about sex in openly and so on. Too bad, because children are not only indulging in it, but actually talking about it. You know, I mean, also talking about it. So, but we have to face the realities, and when we do these conversations, we have to look at what the reality is for Fiji.
How do you think young people interact with each other in terms of behavior? Like, is them using certain words, derogatory terms to one another, making it more acceptable? Do you think this is one of the things that lead up to young women being raped in schools?
Yes, there is a certain disrespect. You know, machoism is on the increase in this country. And there are, you know, there's a lot of pornography, exposure to social media, all kinds of things people are watching. They're also imitating adult behavior. So it's okay, you know, for certain sexual activities, and people are experimenting and so on. So I think those things we need to talk about, but I just want to add something else. The Education Department has a very good program, the National Substance Abuse and Stopping Violence Against Young Women program. But I believe that it is underfunded, and we need to fund those kind of programs whereby students themselves are taking leadership on ending violence against young women and boys and so on within the school system. So that program needs to be sort of expanded and, you know, and worked upon every year, reviewed and expanded, and bringing in the experts, as I say once again. So, and funded, definitely, you know, we need funding for these kind of things. So I think those are some of the things that needs to be revived, that are already existing, but also for young people, I believe, you know, like we work with young people, we go into communities, when we're talking to kids, they want to talk. They want to talk about what we learn a lot from them just by if we listen to them.
That is definitely something I want to touch on again right after this, but right now we'll just go to a break. We'll be back shortly after this. You're watching For the Record. Welcome back. You're watching For the Record. So you had spoken about the National NASEC. You had spoken about NASEC and how they have an existing program. What other existing programs are there, and how can they benefit young people in terms of education, and probably against, violence against women, educating them on things like drug abuse and all these other stuff, like what NASEC does? You mentioned NRL as well.
Yes. NRL is the National Rugby League. So there's an Australian group who have worked with the Fiji NRL, FNRL, and they have programs for boys teaching respect and respectful play and so on within certain schools and certain areas and communities. What's a good thing is that NRL is working with the Crisis Center, and we've been working together for the past 2 years, and to genderize the teachings that they have, to teach respect for women and for girls, and to talk about domestic violence within that, and and healthy living, healthy lifestyles, and they're teaching it through rugby. So that is a good initiative. But again, there are many good initiatives which lack of funding or lack of political will sort of just dies out. Just dies out. And that is not actually worth the trouble, and that is not going to be effective. We have to have sustainability of the programs that are working. We have to have good monitoring and evaluation strategies around it to actually find out what works. And sometimes that's where we fall down.
How about on the issue of young women and the way they dress up? Why is that people continue to think or associate them with being raped, with this being raped?
Well, that is an age-old myth that has always been there, blaming the women for the rape, everything that happens to them. And one of them is women's clothes. And people seem to hang on to that. If women behaved better, were not cheeky, as some of the people who go out in the communities say to the boys, don't touch the women, don't do this, don't do that. But girls, you two don't be cheeky, that kind. Once you say that, you're really neutralizing the whole thing. You might as well not have spoken. So this whole idea about women being the temptress and so on. So we move our attention from the perpetrator and we just look at the survivor, at the person to whom it happens, to the woman. So how she dresses, all the skimpy clothing and so on. The fact is that if you look at the profiles of survivors of rape, they can be anybody. They can be 8 months old baby, female child, to a 90-year-old female. There are women with disabilities. There are women from the LGBTQ group. It can be anyone. Young, age doesn't have anything to do with clothes or anything.
Do you think a lot of it has to do with culture? With how people perceive women and the way they should dress?
Yes.
Long skirts,
yes.
Or religion?
Yes.
Do these things play a major factor in the way people think,
yes.
especially in this country?
Yes, here throughout the Pacific, I work throughout anywhere. Look, we had in England recently someone saying because she was wearing skinny jeans, tight jeans, that's why she got raped. A judge sort of talked about that. So it's all over. Women's dressing, is often blamed for rape, but that is not the case, especially when we are looking at the profiles. As I said before, anyone can get raped, no matter what they were wearing, where they were. In fact, most of the rapes are committed by people that the survivor knows. And that's about 80%, and 50% of those are relatives. So we often have to say, where are women actually safe? And that is why it's not upon women to protect themselves from rape. It's for a society to change its thinking about women, about women's behavior, about promoting gender equality. That's where we should be looking at, rather than she went to the nightclub, the kind of clothes she was wearing, the way she was talking very cheekily to the boy or something like that. We have to move away, and that is the main reason why we continue to have rape, because we blame the victim syndrome and we always excuse the perpetrator.
Where would you start something like this? Would you start it in high school or primary level in order to change the mindsets? Because obviously, for young people nowadays, when it comes to sex or violence and rape against violence or rape cases concerning women, there seems to be, well, lack of a better word, like they don't really care. And this is something that I've noticed, not just on social media, but the way people talk about it, the conversations around it. They're just like, it's almost become a norm that people just like, oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
So where would you rather start this, the changing of mindsets, especially in schools, at a primary level or at a secondary level?
But I think the whole thing starts at home, I think, when you start teaching respect for each other, and particularly respect for women, how the men in the house treat women in the house, how a husband treats his wife. The children are looking at that, imitating that behavior. Where is the boy learning that he's the boss man and he can get whatever he wants to? So it starts from there, then it moves on to schools. The teachers actually need to feel comfortable in themselves to talk about these things and believe it. And if we are passing that message to children, we ourselves have to believe it, and live our lives in that manner, And the personal is political, So what we're saying out there, we should be walking the talk ourselves, and so on. So I think the teachers need to have training. So because in the everyday behavior, everyday interaction with children, we can promote respect and so on. The way we treat boys, the way we treat girls, and so on within the school system. So that's the best place is there. When the kids are outside, then the faith-based organizations have a huge role to play. How they preach, how they interpret the scriptures and so on, the teachings of God and so on, and not their own version of it, because that's again problematic. So it happens at every step. We have to stop sexual harassment. That's the first step to rape. If a person is sexually harassing, that person has got the potential to be a rapist, because the mindset is already no respect for women.
What happens to girls who are victims of rape? Like, what are their needs once they go through once they've reported the case?
The first thing they need is support. Emotional support, being believed that it's not their fault. They need to be assured over and over again that it is never their fault, no matter where they were, what they were wearing. So they need to have that supportive environment. It can happen at the home, it can be with friends, it can be in the school, and it can be with wherever, the hospital, police station, the court system, wherever they go for help. We should all be ready and provide that for them. But the emotional support, the being believed, and that is the first step to it.
Thank you for that. There's definitely something I want to touch on shortly after this. We'll go to a quick break. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back to For the Record. So, as we were talking about the needs of girls who are victims of rape, how about the boys who are victims of rape? Would their needs be any different?
Their needs would be also the same. It's a traumatic experience for anyone. But boys, their reaction, little boys, of course, they're totally vulnerable and they really don't know what has happened. They are hurting, so they need all the care that they can get, even though it's the dearest uncle, the grandfather, or whoever it is. They need the support, not the perpetrator, definitely. But with younger men and older men who get raped by other men, there's also that whole genderized notion of, I'm a man, this should not happen to me. It's okay, it happens to women, but I've been used like a woman. So they are quite hesitant to come out and admit it. So there needs to be some work done with that to come out. In fact, organizations like the Crisis Center and the whole feminist women's movement has opened up spaces for men to come out, and that is why we're hearing men talk about it. We're hearing young men who have been actually sexually assaulted, raped as children within their own faith-based organizations. We have people who are now in their 40s and 50s who are coming out and talking about it. And they come to who? They come to us to talk about it, because we have created that trusting environment, a safer environment for men to come out. But that is what would stop men. But again, I would like to emphasize that all data throughout the world, including Fiji, shows that most people who have been raped are women. And there is a small percentage of men and boys who, and particularly adult men, who have been raped.
I believe that later on this week you'll be releasing your new research, new findings on the rape cases in Fiji. Could you tell me more about that?
Actually, it's not about that. We have been quite worried over the last few years about how rape cases are being treated. In places where women should be getting services and support and so on, and why we are losing, why we're not getting the higher rates of convictions, why are women giving up after the first visit to the police station, they don't want to continue and so on. And so that is the research that we've done, and we're hoping that within the next 4 months we will release it. And it's about access to justice for rape survivors.
So from your experience, what happens when they go through the justice system? Has it been made victim or survivor friendly?
No. I can guarantee you that the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, definitely, because this is where we've worked for 33 years on these issues, that is survivor friendly, and I can guarantee you that the survivor will get the support that she needs. But
in the justice system, there's no such.
No, it is improving, I must say, with the Crimes Act and so on. The DPP taking out the statistics, so it's there for us to see how many reported, how many convicted, and so on. What we are interested in are the ones which never got to court. So the police, there still is, though there have been improvements, their sexual offences unit, there still is great room for improvement. That's where, because that is our major stakeholders in this work, because that's where women will go to.
And where do you think the problem lies in this?
It's the thinking, it's the attitude. We all grow up, and all police officers grow up like you and I. The genderized nature of our society, about how women are, what their place is, what the man's place is, and so on, what a man is supposed to do and how he's not supposed to behave, what a woman is supposed to do, how she is not supposed to behave. So we all grow up and we bring in that place in everywhere we go, our place of work, the community we live in, so those attitudes. So the police also go in with those attitudes. The court clerk, the lawyers, the magistrate, judges, all go in with those things. So and that is why it's difficult for them to respond as appropriately as they should, because this whole thing about culture, religion, about women's place, women asking to be raped, women the temptress and so on, and not blame this poor men being blamed for this kind of thing. That attitude is very much ingrained in our psyche, and that is why we always encourage police training, awareness raising during, from recruit level to every qualifying course and so on, and we are trying that with the Fiji police. So because we have to have that change, and anyone who responds to this must go through gender, human rights, and violence against women and girls training.
It was very surprising, though, to find out from the Office of the Director of Prosecutions that all rape cases, or sexual abuse cases rather, were referred to medical service provider. Now, service specific rather. How could this be a problem?
Well, it can be a problem because we haven't, I think, when you do that without exploring other options, because every survivor needs to be given the option where she or he wants to go to. And I don't think that has been done. And one provider cannot do everything. Do we have the capacity to do that? So from children, we have moved to adult rape survivors also. So it can be a problem. Do they have the capacity? Are the counselors trained? Are they advocating on behalf of the survivors? That is very important because of the challenges that is offered, particularly, this is one crime where there are many challenges in terms of attitudes, gendered attitudes, So it's very important that people undergo that kind of training, and you have to advocate. Our counselors spend a lot of their time just advocating on behalf of the survivors. And this is one reason some of the institutions don't want to use the crisis center, because we are like a dog with a bone. Once a survivor comes to us and reports, we will follow that up as far as she wants us to go. So we'll be calling the police, and and we'll be calling the DPP's office, the social welfare, wherever, and find where is this case. And a lot of people don't like that because some of them are not doing the right thing by the survivor, So
isn't that what's supposed to happen?
Yes, it is supposed to happen. We should not be everyone should know their place. So hopefully, with the new national delivery protocol for services for women and girls, that we will put some of these things right. But at this point in time, while over the 33 years things have improved, we are still having challenges. And when you have a 24-hour line, you have to be at the end of the line, because there can be a desperate child, a desperate girl, a desperate woman calling you. And if you have put your number up there as the 24-hour helpline, toll-free, you have to be at the end of the line, and that's another challenge.
But actually, that's something I definitely want to touch on shortly after this. We'll go to a quick break, and we'll be back again. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back. You're watching For the Record. Now, as we spoke about medical service specific and how, them being the only referred to service provider for victims of rape by the DPP. Shouldn't that be a collaborative thing from other stakeholders as well, medical service providers, at least in terms of providing support to victims of rape and sexual abuse? I mean, one would think that with the amount of cases that are coming out now, that if you have, let's say, 10 counselors in a particular work, in like let's say in MSP, could they cater for the number of cases that are coming out? I'm pretty sure that that's a definite no, but what do you think?
Well, I'm not in a position to comment on that. They would, but I do know that sometimes providers are not there to respond to calls, for a lot of the services that are being advertised. They're not at the end of the line, so people end up with us again. So I think that needs to be seen. But I want to push the National Delivery Protocol that has been drafted by the EVO Task Force, and it's waiting to be endorsed. And it's being, driven by the Ministry for Women and Social Welfare and Poverty Alleviation, and the Minister is very keen on that, and we are waiting for that to be endorsed. When that is endorsed, that will be taken again. It has been developed with a lot of consultation in all our districts and with all the stakeholders. So once that has been done, we are hoping that these things will change, because there are other service providers listed in there, and everyone will get a chance to sit around again and have focused group discussions around it, and so on. And it has been produced with the technical assistance from UN Women, and we have been very much part of that. So hopefully with that, these kind of problems will decrease.
Okay, another thing that I want to touch on is, are there enough trained, skilled, or experienced counselors in the country? I know the DPP have their own set of counselors, clearly MSP, then you have different organizations and entities like NASEC. Are these counselors skilled and trained and well-trained enough to handle cases of rape and sexual abuse?
Well, they might have some skills, but do they have the time? That's the question. That's the question. And do they have the skills to also advocate? So, and do they understand the dynamics of it, the impact, the urgency, and particularly where children are concerned? So those things, in my experience, and I know people might get offended, but I have to say it, I don't think we have enough of that. There needs to be, and people can do it. We work in communities, so if you're working in Naitasiri, as a few communities we are working with there over the last 5 years, so we are developing a group of people, women there, who are having these basic counseling skills, so the immediate skills they can do. The faith-based organizations, I know that the Anglican Church has got, the House of Sarah and so on, but again, a lot more skills are required everywhere, but we can develop those skills. But it has to be on gender, violence against women, girls and children, and human rights, and it has to be done there, and a very survivor-centered kind of approach, and not start looking at what are the causes, maybe it was drugs, no, survivor-centered approach, and I think that is what is missing in a lot of services that are being provided. Everyone with very good intentions, I must say. People want to help out, but I think we have to learn how to respond. Otherwise, we end up doing a lot more harm.
How about law enforcement? How can they affect victims of rape during the reporting process?
Okay. There's a lot of work to be done there, and we are in the process of working through all those things. I believe that, while there has been a lot of improvement, as I said before, there are a lot of good police officers who have undergone awareness and training and so on, who do good work. We do have, on the other hand, some very horrible people who will ask questions like, you sure you didn't know the rapist, this person? You must have known him, that's why you went with him, or something like that. And so again, putting the blame, we continue getting that.
So there's no specialized...
No, so there is a sexual offences unit, and there are people who are trained in there, but we need to have them, more of them trained. And but most of the districts don't have that. A few of them have. So most people would go to the normal police station or the police post and so on. So there needs to be that awareness there. There need to be some policies that are disciplinable. That people, if they do not adhere to those policies, they should be disciplined, and the procedure should be set out. It's not just a tap, like a step on the hands, don't do that next time. It has to be disciplined. And only then will officers of anywhere, any service delivery, but particularly police, they are so important.
Could you explain to me what the reporting process is like? If a victim was to come to you for your service, how would you go about trying to get them into the justice system or getting their case or get their case going?
Okay. We'll of course look at her safety, look at what injuries she has got, does she need immediate medical help and so on. We lay out options for her, particularly if she's over age, over the age of 18. Children of course have to go to social welfare, have to report, and then social welfare has got its own procedures. Yeah.
And are there, we're working with social welfare. Are there any difficulties there?
Yes, there are challenges everywhere. There are challenges everywhere. I think I believe that the social welfare department is quite overwhelmed because it's doing so much work, that particular ministry, that often it's about resources. It's about human resources also. So I think we do have difficulties in raising them at times. Even police sometimes have difficulties raising them. Then we are contacted to see how we can go about these things. So there is a difficulty there. Most times it's okay, but a lot of other times it is not okay. So that's one thing. But for us, for over 18, and then we will continue. If a child comes to us, we will continue the counseling while all the other things are happening, provided the child hasn't been taken away and referred to another service. So then we will go through the police, and as long as the survivor wants us to accompany her, we'll call up and follow up and so on, and sometimes it can take ages to do that. Then we'll follow it through the court system, and we do sometimes work with DPP. We used to work a lot more with DPP's office by familiarizing, particularly if the person is underage, with the court system and working with DPP's officers and so on. That seems to have disappeared a little bit right now, but we used to have a very good system going before. So we'll do all that, but we will go through the whole court, support her through the court system and so on.
So if you're not doing that now, then who is? Who is looking after or doing the follow-ups for victims who are younger or under the age of 18?
Yeah.
Like is the DPP's office are able to handle with the follow-ups, or at least work with social welfare? Because it seems like you said, they're overwhelmed, and resources definitely need to, human resources especially.
Yeah. And training for them also. But I believe that, I really don't know, that's a question you should ask them, but definitely we are not doing that together in collaboration with certain services, and for the reasons I have outlined before. But there needs to be that coming together of people, of service providers, and to see what is the best way forward for the survivor, rather than saying we know what we are doing. That attitude needs to go also, because I find that some of the challenges that the crisis center, yes, and people become personalize it rather than saying who is the center of all this, and the center of it all is the survivor. They forget the survivor. It's about, no one should say we didn't do this, no one should say that. And I think we, in Fiji as a society, if we want to realistically end this kind of terrible crimes against our women and children and so on, then we really have to be a lot more unselfish and stop personalizing.
All right. We'll talk more about that shortly after this, but we'll go to a quick break and we'll be back again. You're watching For the Record. Good evening again, and welcome back to For the Record. Now, we had spoken about different services. Obviously, social welfare needs more help in terms of not just reporting, but in human resources as well. How about facilities? Do both the police and social welfare have the facilities to cater for victims of rape in cases of sexual abuse as well, and women with violence against women?
Well, social welfare, there is I think a child protection department within that, so they should have the space, and I think we do take people over there and they have the space. But whether they have the counseling skills, all of them have gone through, or is it very basic and so on. So they do the referrals. No? And the police, of course, have got the police stations, but also the sexual offences unit. So I think Suva, Lautoka, Lambasa have got units dedicated to that. And then I believe that from what I have been told, there are different police stations which have got officers who are trained and who can cater for this. But whether it's working as smoothly as it should, that's another question. You know, while a lot of times it is, a lot of times it isn't either.
How can like a religion or community sort of like be a problem for the recovery process for victims of rape and sexual abuse?
I believe it can be a very positive thing, you know, they can do very positive things for the survivors, but they can sometimes also be a problem. And when we have had the experience where the survivors have gone and sought assistance from a faith-based or their own religious group, where they have been told perhaps the devil is in you and we must pray to get the devil out of you and things like that, you know. So, and they want to reconcile rather than report it as the crime that it is. So that also is a problematic area, though through all the community awareness that is being done with the ministry and the zero tolerance communities, what we are doing, and I think other groups that are going around doing this work, the REACH program from UNDP, I think, you know, people are changing attitudes and are being a lot more supportive, including the faith-based organizations who are members of those communities. But still, I believe that faith-based organizations have a huge role to play, provided they are willing to undergo, you know, the rights-based training and so on gender, human rights, and violence against women.
What are your views on how far things have come in Fiji in terms of reporting and, creating awareness on violence against women and women who have been, and women and children who have been sexually abused or raped?
I believe we have come a very long way. Look, I started this work in 1985. I started working in this area, 85, sorry. And it's been a long, long journey for the Crisis Center. And we've seen a lot of improvements. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here still doing it. But I believe that Fiji is in a wonderful place. You know, now the government has taken up the issue. We have a national toll-free helpline, which we are contracted, 1560, please remember everyone, 1560 is the helpline, 24 hours. So, you know, there are a lot of things. We look at our Domestic Violence Act, the Crimes Act, and so on, that there has been a lot of improvement. It's on everyone's agenda now. People want to do something about it. They want to talk about it. The health sector also has got a protocol document and so on that has been developed. So a lot of things are happening. And a lot of people are reporting because there have been improvements. But I still believe we're in a wonderful place to do a lot more and to set the stage, not only for the Pacific, for Fiji, but the Pacific also.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight, Shamima, and making time for it and shedding light on the issues, especially with young people rape, but also the services and how they can be improved. That was For the Record for the evening. We hope you enjoyed the show and will join us again next Sunday. Join Imani Ndelembatiki next with his My Say. And from the team and I, good night.